Gates and dungeons started appearing all over the world. Monsters poured out, and the world was thrown into darkness. Disasters were everywhere, and it felt like humanity was on the verge of disappearing. But even then, people fought back. The appearance of these monsters also brought new powers, giving humanity a chance to survive. By hunting monsters, people found new energy and materials. It was enough to rebuild, giving everyone a new sense of hope. This new era created a new kind of person, the hunter. They were ranked from the all-powerful S-class all the way down to G-class, based on their abilities. But being a G-class hunter wasn't much better than being a regular person. Their abilities were basically the same. Everyone wanted a hero to save the world. But the truth was, once your rank was set, there was almost no chance of it ever changing. A young woman in a school uniform stared at the poster. She didn't look very inspired. This is Miri. She was at the Hunter Association, looking at her evaluation papers again. She was requesting another reevaluation. It was her 10th one, and she still wasn't getting the results she wanted. She felt completely defeated, wondering if all her hard work even mattered. That's when a voice from behind her asked if she just felt a shock. She turned around, a little smug. Her first thought was that he was hitting on her, but the guy, Yu Il-shin, just looked really uncomfortable. He quickly tried to tell her not to get the wrong idea. Her mood changed instantly. She got annoyed, wondering if he was some kind of creep. Her hands started to crackle with electricity. Seeing that, Il-shin panicked. He quickly made an excuse about getting a phone call and tried to get out of there. He shouted an excuse about a phone call and just ran for it. Miri was left standing there, completely confused by the whole thing. Before she could figure out what his deal was, her number was called. It was time for her evaluation. A little while later, she stood outside the building, holding the results in her hands. She looked down at the paper. Her class was still B+. She couldn't break through to A class again. She felt completely defeated, wondering if it was even possible to surpass the limits of your given class. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was an emergency notification. A gate had opened in Seoul, and an A-class monster called a thorned bull had been spotted. Her eyes widened in shock. A thorned bull was a serious threat. The monster was already rampaging through a park in the middle of the city. People were screaming and running for their lives, but there were no hunters there to help them yet. The alert was for a thorned bull. This wasn't just some random monster. It was powerful enough to destroy an entire city on its own. On the streets, it was total panic. People were screaming and running for their lives, trying to get away from the destruction. In the confusion, the little girl tripped and fell. The man, Song-yan, rushed to her side, asking if she was okay. He pulled her close, trying to shield her, but there was nowhere left to run. That's when the monster spotted them. It towered over them, ready to crush them both. But just before it could strike, a massive storm of lightning came crashing down from the sky, hitting the bull head on. It was Miri. She was charging straight for the monster, crackling with power, but the attack did nothing. The thorned bull just stood there, completely unfazed. Miri couldn't believe it. Her strongest skill hadn't even left a scratch. She decided to go all out. Gathering all her power, she unleashed her ultimate attack, Lightning Storm. She landed hard on the street below. Turning back, she desperately hoped it was enough to take the monster down. But when the smoke cleared, the thorned bull was still standing there, roaring. It was completely unharmed. The force of its roar sent a shockwave blasting towards her. She threw her arms up to block, but it was too late. The monster charged, tearing up the entire street as it came for her. She was thrown back hard, sent tumbling through the broken concrete. Lying in the rubble, she finally understood. An A-class monster was on a completely different level. That's when she saw them. Song-yan was still there, shielding the little girl. She panicked. There were still people trapped in the middle of all this. This was bad, really bad. Song-yan was still out there, trying to protect the child. Song-yan was frozen in fear, completely speechless. He screamed at her to run away, telling her he didn't know how long he could last. The thorned bull charged, and Miri stood her ground, ready to face it head on. She knew she couldn't win, but she had to buy them some time. She tried to gather her energy, but her power was already fading. The monster was just too strong. As everything went dark, she could only think of her parents. She collapsed to her knees, defeated. All she could do was cry, surrounded by the ruins of the city. It was over. Lying on the ground, defeated, Miri swore she would never forgive them. Through her tears, she promised to take down every last one of them. But Song-yan just watched her, her face unreadable. She told Miri to stop dreaming about something as foolish as revenge. Her eyes glowed with a cold light, but Miri just scoffed at her words. She got to her feet, shouting that she refused to accept this. As she did, a powerful energy started to gather around her. That's when a strange voice echoed in her head. Her eyes began to crackle with lightning. A huge wave of blue energy exploded from her body. The power surged, changing her completely as she struggled to contain the incredible force. She gathered all the energy she had, unleashing a massive ball of pure lightning. It grew bigger and wilder, turning into a raging storm of electricity. The energy exploded outwards, tearing through the city in a blinding flash. When the dust settled, the streets were filled with cheers. People called her the Lightning Empress, thanking her for defeating an A-class monster. But then, a different image appeared. A news report celebrated a B-class hunter named Leighton, crediting him with defeating the thorned bull. Miri stared at her hands, completely lost. She was sure she was the one who had just defeated the thorned bull. She couldn't understand what that power was. Looking at the giant monster lying defeated before her, she knew one thing for sure. The power she just used felt like it had pushed her far beyond her limits. Just then, A man holding his daughter came up to her. He thanked her, saying he didn't know how he could ever repay her for saving them. The man was just so grateful. He kept thanking her, saying he was just glad his daughter was safe. She watched them disappear into the crowd of onlookers, but then something hit her. She suddenly wondered how that man knew her name. No one was supposed to know she was the Lightning Empress. That's when it all clicked. The voice she'd heard in her head, the one who called himself Index Finger. It was his. The man simply told his daughter it was time to go home. As they walked away, Songmiri was left with one burning question. Who was he? The bridge was quiet at night. Turns out, this place was known for people who wanted to end everything, but he wasn't there for that. In fact, his reason for being there was the exact opposite. He remembered almost dying, a terrifying monster nearly taking him out. It felt like everyone, even his own family, had forgotten all about him, and he knew exactly what was to blame for all of it. His phone. He was so angry, he looked like he was about to throw the thing right over the railing. It all started a couple of days ago. He was a writer, and he was completely stuck. The words just wouldn't come out, and his deadline was the very next day. So instead of writing, he decided to do something else. He figured he'd just organize the apps on his phone. That's when he noticed a strange app he didn't recognize. He couldn't remember ever downloading it, but he decided to open it anyway. The app's icon suddenly opened up, revealing a huge, monstrous mouth. The game was called Godmaker. When it finally loaded, the game looked awful. It was just a pixelated ant, and the text was a bunch of symbols he couldn't even read. He thought it was just some trash game. Without giving it much thought, he just tapped the screen. The ant died instantly. But then, something impossible happened. A real gold coin shot right out of the phone screen and flew straight at his face. He stared at the coin in his hand. It felt completely real. On the phone, a message popped up confirming that a coin was dropped as a reward. That's when it hit him. He wondered if this was it, if he had finally obtained the ability of a hunter. He went straight to the Hunter Association to get his ability tested. After what felt like forever, his number was finally called. The second his name echoed through the room, people started laughing. He was so embarrassed, he just wanted to disappear. But the woman at the counter gave him a huge smile. She congratulated him, confirming that he did, in fact, have an ability. He just froze. After all this time, it was actually happening. His mind started racing with possibilities. He wasn't asking for anything amazing, like an A-class rank. He just prayed he would get D-class. That would be enough. The employee happily announced his results. He was a G-class. G-class. The lowest possible rank. His entire body went stiff as the words hit him. She tried to stay positive, pointing out that his ability was a creation type. But Ilshin just stared at the paper, crushed. A G-class hunter was no different from a regular person. The employee asked if he wanted to register for a license. Ilshin mumbled a question about the cost. She told him the fee was $280. He just snapped. He refused, saying it was a waste of money, since there were no dungeons for G-classes anyway. Defeated, he decided to just go home and finish his novel chapter. Sometime later, he was back at his desk, staring at his laptop. It was already 2 a.m, and he felt like he'd accomplished nothing after hours of just writing and deleting. Deciding to take a break, he turned on the TV. The news was on, reporting that a S-class hunter named Baek Yu-hyun had just challenged a disaster-class dungeon. The reporter announced that he had succeeded. It was a huge step forward for mankind. Ilshin just sat there, watching. Then, an ad came on for a skin cream. It was apparently the same product that another S-class hunter, Seong Mina, used before every dungeon raid. He gripped his phone, his face twisting in frustration. It felt like everywhere he looked, there were hunters doing great things. He was so frustrated with his writing that he just gave up. He decided to sleep it off and try again with a clear mind. But a little while later, a strange sound started ringing in his room. It was coming from his phone, and it just wouldn't stop. The constant ringing finally started to get to him. He was furious, wondering what kind of alarm was so annoying that it wouldn't turn itself off. Turns out, it wasn't an alarm at all. It was that strange game on his phone. He was tapping away, completely focused on taking down an ant monster. He was completely obsessed, determined to beat the little creatures on his screen. As he kept tapping, a massive pile of coins started to build up. The next morning, Ilshin finally woke up, looking completely drained. He sat up and looked around, wondering where all the coins from the game had gone. Ilshin looked at the coins scattered on his bed. He thought they were just small change, but then he noticed something. One of the coins had the number 100 on it. Just as he was looking at the coin, his phone suddenly lit up. The game had a message for him. It said he'd unlocked something called the God Shop and asked if he wanted to enter. He hesitated for a second, then a grin spread across his face. He decided to go for it. The moment his finger touched the phone, a blinding light shot out from the screen. He stared, completely stunned. Miles away, a meeting of very important people was taking place. A man stood at a grand doorway, welcoming the president and the leader of the Hunter Association. Inside, the room was filled with powerful figures. They were celebrating because a hunter in their country had finally unlocked the Hunter Shop. This was a huge deal, an ability that almost no one ever get. The host welcomed 2 more people into the meeting. They walked in, looking very important, ready to join the discussion. The man they were talking about was Kang Woo, a S-class hunter. He was the one they believed had unlocked the Hunter Shop. Next to him was Seong Mina, another S-class hunter. All of the country's most powerful people were gathered in that room, and at the head of the table, listening to everything, was the president of South Korea. The host thanked everyone for coming, especially the president and the head of the Hunter Association. This was a very important meeting. Inside, everyone was buzzing. They couldn't believe their country finally had someone who could use the Hunter shop. The host clapped his hands, telling everyone to come in and get ready. Kang Woo and Seong Mina watched with serious expressions. The whole room was waiting to see what would happen. The host then formally requested the activation of the Hunter shop. Everyone in the crowd held their breath. Kang Woo stepped forward and held out his hands. With a shout, he tried to open the shop. A huge blast of energy threw everyone back. People were coughing and trying to get up, making sure the president was all right. But after all that, there was nothing there. The president admitted he couldn't see a thing, and the man next to him agreed. The host just smiled and told everyone not to worry. He explained that it was perfectly normal. Only the person who activated the shop could actually see it. The host had a plan. He announced that Seong Mina would use her psychic ability to show everyone what Kang Woo was seeing. The men in the crowd looked up, completely stunned. Suddenly, a massive screen appeared in the air. It was the Hunter shop, and the items for sale were unbelievable. The crowd was speechless. There was an A-class potion, the S-class sword Excalibur, and even an SS-class skill called Lightning God's Blessing. These were things people only heard about in stories. The officials were losing their minds. One of them figured out the price of the blessing was in the billions, but he said for that kind of power, it was actually cheap. Just then, the president's voice cut through the noise, demanding everyone's attention. He looked at them with a grave expression. The fate of the entire nation rested on this, he explained, so it had to be kept a complete secret. To make sure nothing went wrong, they were assigning at least 2 S-class hunters to guard Kang Woo at all times. But miles away, the real owner was just looking at his phone. A message popped up, congratulating the nameless god for unlocking the god's shop. This whole time, they had the wrong person. Il-shin grinned. He knew curiosity could be dangerous, but he didn't care. He was going in. The system told him it would cost 100 coins to activate the god's shop. Without a second thought, he agreed. As soon as he accepted, the coins on his bed vanished. He started to wonder if his shop could really compare to what a powerful hunter like Kang Woo might have. The god's shop finally opened on his screen. He was expecting something amazing, but when he saw the prices, his jaw dropped. He couldn't even read the names of the items, but the prices were clear. 1 million, 3.5 million, even 100 million gold. He just stared at the screen, counting the zeros. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He slumped down on his bed, completely defeated. It had taken him all night just to earn 300 coins. With prices like these, it felt impossible. But then, the shop screen started scrolling all by itself. It stopped on one item at the very bottom, and the price was only 100 gold. It was the only thing he could afford. He stared at the screen, wondering if the game was trying to push him into buying it. He tapped the screen, and just like that, one of his coins vanished. A message popped up, confirming he had just bought a skill called the Blind God's Eyes. He looked closer at the description. He couldn't understand what a unique authority was, and the name itself was worrying. What good were blind eyes? The second he finished reading, a strange feeling shot through him. His eyes went completely white, and he was thrown backward onto his bed. He dropped his phone and grabbed his face, crying out in pain. Everything went pitch black. He stumbled around his room in a panic, terrified that the skill had actually made him blind. He frantically felt around on the floor, trying to find his phone. It was his only hope of figuring out what was going on. As he crawled through the darkness, he slammed his foot into the corner of his bed frame. He let out a scream of pure agony, but just as suddenly as it started, the darkness was gone. He could see again. Il-shin let out a huge sigh of relief, his heart still pounding from the fear. He picked up his phone and looked at the screen. That's when he realized what the skill actually did. The strange, jumbled text in the shop was now perfectly clear. He started scrolling through the items. The names were insane. Things like Pandora's Box and Flames of Gehenna. The prices were even crazier, reaching into the trillions. He even saw a skill called Creation. As a writer, he couldn't help but feel like he'd just become the main character of some wild fantasy story. He remembered what they always said, G-classes stay G-class until they die. But he also knew there were rare exceptions. A new thought started to form in his mind. He shook his head, coming back to reality. He decided to see if there was anything else he could actually buy with the coins he had left. He scrolled until he found another one he could afford, God's Crushing Index Finger. It sounded cool enough, so he decided to just go for it. He tapped the buy button without a second thought. Another coin disappeared, and a message from the system confirmed his purchase. He had just bought another unique authority. He stared at his finger, trying to figure out what his new skill, God's Crushing Index Finger, actually did. Just then, his air conditioner beeped. He decided to try it out. He pointed his finger at the AC and thought the skill's name. The air conditioner immediately turned on. He tried it again, and the machine stopped. He did it one more time, and it whirred back to life. He pointed his finger, and the air conditioner stopped on command. Curious, he aimed his finger at his computer monitor. The screen instantly switched to the morning weather forecast. He watched the weather report for a moment, sweat dripping down his face. A thought started to form in his mind. He realized his super powerful, god-tier skill was basically just an universal remote control. He couldn't believe it. He decided to test his new power on the one thing that really mattered, his laptop. He pointed his finger, hoping for a miracle. Of course, it didn't work. He sighed. realizing his god-tier skill couldn't even write his novel for him. Just then, his phone started to ring. He looked at the screen and saw it was from someone important. He picked it up, and the person on the other end was practically yelling with excitement. They told him that the story he'd sent over was amazing. Ilshin was completely caught off guard. He remembered just writing a quick story about his experience with the little creatures in the game. He couldn't believe they actually liked. The person on the phone insisted the story was a real hit, but then they said there was one huge problem. Ilshin immediately tensed up, asking what was wrong. Turns out, the only problem was that the story was so good, they were desperate for the next chapter. Relieved, Ilshin promised he'd have it ready in a few days. The person on the other end was thrilled. They admitted they hadn't expected much at first, but now they were a huge fan and wished him good luck. Ilshin couldn't believe it. People actually thought his story about killing the little creatures was fun. That was all the motivation he needed. It was time to get back to work. He jumped right back into the game. He told himself it was all for his next project. A system message popped up, confirming another creature was down and another coin was earned. He just kept tapping, completely focused. Coins started appearing all over his floor, piling up around him. Suddenly, all the small coins on the floor started glowing. They flew together and merged into one big coin. He had finally hit 100. He reached down and picked it up. He immediately opened the shop, but even the cheapest items cost 1,000 coins. Then he saw it, a low-class item called Blessing of the God of Growth. He figured even a weak growth skill had to be better than another universal remote. The idea of getting stronger was all he needed to hear. He set a new goal, get 1,000 coins and buy that item. Without wasting a second, he sat back down at his desk and started tapping. But just as he got into a rhythm, a new message popped up on his screen. He stopped, confused. He wasn't expecting this. He was tapping away when he noticed something weird. One of the creatures just wouldn't die, no matter how many times he hit it. He leaned in closer to the screen. Now that he was really looking, he could see this one was completely different from the others. Then it hit him. This had to be a boss. A huge, crazy grin spread across his face. This was getting interesting. He went to tap it, but the creature actually dodged his finger. He couldn't believe it. The little thing was fast, and it was starting to get on his nerves. That was it. He decided to get serious, boasting that he was about to show this thing what a real rhythm game master could do. After a frantic burst of tapping, he was completely wiped out, panting for breath. He looked at the screen and realized he had missed. He couldn't understand how a tiny creature like that could be so fast. He just watched it for a moment, his expression turning serious. This wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. He completely lost it, screaming at the phone as he tapped like a madman. And finally, he got it. A message popped up confirming that the boss, number 801, had been crushed. He kept going, looking completely exhausted. The system told him his karma as the nameless god was now over 800. It also said he was close to getting a new title, the great evil god who seeks defeat and power. It was 3 a.m, and he was so tired, it looked like his soul was leaving his body. The system promised a reward if he managed to get the title, but he could barely keep his eyes open. He finally passed out from exhaustion, but as he slept, his phone lit up with a new message. It said in unique authority, the Black God's Eye was being activated. Then, a different kind of alert appeared. It looked glitchy and dangerous. The message said it was now tracking a offering that he had missed. Far away from his room, the world was quiet. An old movie projector hummed in the dark. Below it were rows and rows of empty cinema seats. Well, not entirely empty. One person sat all alone in the darkness, just staring at the blank white screen. Suddenly, a man found himself sitting in a dark, empty movie theater. He looked around in a panic, shouting out to see if anyone else was there. He recognized the place as a cinema, but had no clue how he got there. Just then, a bright light flashed right in front of him, and his eyes widened in shock. He was completely frozen in his seat, staring up at the source of the blinding light. The vision ended, leaving a lone, robed creature kneeling in a vast desert. He realized he had just witnessed the true power of the god of the Black Tribe. He dragged himself through the sand, bleeding from his injuries. He couldn't believe a god would be willing to sacrifice its own followers just to get to him. To the creature, this wasn't a god at all. It was a demon. With new resolve, he knew he couldn't waste any more time. He had to get back and warn his people about the threat. He finally made it back through the wasteland. Staggering, he arrived at the entrance to his people's home. He collapsed right at the entrance, coughing up blood. The image of the monster that had hunted him was still burned into his mind. He barely managed to get inside, using his sword just to stay on his feet. He had nothing left. But far away from there, the victors were preparing a feast. The main course was brought before their leader, who waited with its mouth wide open. The leader didn't hesitate, tearing into the meal. Inside their great hall, the entire tribe bowed down. Their leader stood before them, a king looking over his subjects. With the leader on his throne, the rest of the tribe began to feast on what was left of their enemies. The warrior slammed his sword into the ground. He explained that he'd found where the Black Tribe captives had run to, but they were defeated by the tribe's god. He was the only one who escaped the horrifying monster. He warned them that they had to make their move before that monster came for them. But the hall was completely silent. The other warriors just stared at him. Then, they started laughing. They called him a coward, a disgrace to their army. They said if he was beaten by his own food, he should have just died there. Suddenly, a powerful voice boomed through the hall, demanding silence. The warrior looked up, startled. Instantly, the entire tribe went quiet. An old, robed figure stepped out of the shadows. It was the great shaman. The warrior immediately knelt, addressing the shaman with respect. The great shaman considered the warrior's story. The warrior, Sir 808, explained that he had felt the presence of the evil demon the shaman had warned them about. The warrior's face lit up with relief. He realized his words were true, and the sage was taking him seriously. The sage raised his hand and made a powerful declaration. He announced that this was the territory of their great emperor, and they would destroy the evil god of the Black Tribe. The warrior was completely overwhelmed. He couldn't believe the sage was not only listening, but taking action. Then, the sage unleashed a wave of blue energy. The warrior gasped as he felt all his wounds instantly heal. With the warrior fully recovered, the sage gave his order: guide them to the enemy. He looked out with fiery determination, vowing to take down the demon himself. His words lit a fire in the tribe. The warriors roared, all of them shouting that they would help fight. The entire tribe roared as one, their voices echoing with a single promise: death to the demon. Yu Ilshin snapped awake, drenched in sweat. He stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what had just happened. He sat up, his heart still pounding. The dream had felt way too real. He was completely lost, wondering if he was a man who dreamed he was an ant, or an ant now dreaming he was a man. That's when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and saw the same creature from his dream. He gritted his teeth, determined to finally take it down. But then a message popped up on the screen. He froze. It was the same phrase he'd heard in his dream, and there on the screen was the bearded ant he'd just seen. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a dream, and it wasn't just a game. Suddenly, a bright light shot out of his phone and blasted him right in the face. He stared down at the screen, his eyes wide. It was all real. In that other world, the bearded creature began to gather a huge amount of energy. His soldiers stood ready behind him. His eyes glowed as he began to chant, calling on a power to reject the evil they were facing. And just like that, a massive beam of light erupted, tearing through the sky and blasting their enemy. Back in his room, Yu Ilshin cried out, clutching his head. He could feel all of that power surging through him. The tribe roared with approval. They praised the sage for taking down the evil god. They celebrated their great victory, hoping the emperor would be pleased enough to share a special reward from his expedition. One of the creatures congratulated the sage, but he didn't look relieved. He just stared at his own hands, trembling. Suddenly, he looked up in pure terror. He screamed at everyone to run. A second later, a massive blast of energy slammed into the ground right in front of them, but it wasn't over. 3 more lights appeared in the sky. One of the creatures pointed, yelling that more were coming. The beams rained down, tearing through the tribe. They didn't stand a chance. As one of them fell, it cursed its cruel god. Back in his room, Yu Ilshin slammed his fist down. He crushed the screen with his bare hand. A message popped up, confirming that Sir 808 had been taken down. This wasn't just a game to him anymore. He was putting everything he had into it. He just kept going, taking them down one after another. The system confirmed another one was gone. Then, the reality of it all hit him. He collapsed onto his bed, completely drained. He snatched up his phone, his eyes wide with horror. He'd completely shattered the screen, but through the cracks, a new message popped up. The system congratulated him. He had just earned the title of Evil God. Hey, real quick, my mom said this channel would get 0 subscribers. If you enjoyed the story so far, click subscribe to watch the next part. The system gave him a new title, Cruel Slaughterer. It was for people who reached over 1,000 karma. He just stared at his phone, trying to process it. He couldn't believe it. He thought of himself as a good person who followed the law, not some cruel monster. That's when gold coins started appearing out of thin air, dropping all around him. In the middle of the pile of coins, there was a small glowing ring. He picked it up, wondering what this new item was. As he held it closer, an amazing smell came from the ring. It felt like his head was clearing up instantly. He decided to try it on. The moment he put it on, a green light surrounded him. Suddenly, all his tiredness was just gone. He felt brand new. He looked back at his phone, surprised. Another system message had popped up. His Eye of the Blind God authority had activated and was now examining the ring. A message popped up on his phone. The appraisal was a success. Ilshin was confused. He had no idea what that even meant. The system explained it was the Ring of the Druid, a powerful item that could last forever. Ilshin immediately wondered if this new appraisal skill could work on other objects too. He decided to test it out right away. Focusing his energy, he activated the Eye of the Blind God. The first thing he appraised was his TV. The system told him he still had 3 months of payments left on it. Next, he tried his notebook, which also wasn't paid off. Then his bed, which the system just said was old and needed to be thrown out. He just stood there, staring out the window as the sun came up. This new power was just showing him how broke he was. He felt completely defeated. But then, a thought hit him. He looked down at his hand. He had an incredible magic ring and a brand new appraisal ability to go with it. This could change everything. He couldn't believe he was just a G rank. Not with a ring this powerful. He decided right then to go back to the Paranormal Phenomena Center and get re-examined. So he headed straight there, ready for a second opinion. The woman at the desk seemed surprised. She explained that the test was almost never wrong, but Ilshin was certain. He told her he wanted another examination. That's when she dropped the bombshell. The first exam was paid for by the state, but a re-examination would cost him 1.58 million won. Ilshin was floored. He looked around at all the other people waiting. His confidence completely vanished. He mumbled an apology and told her he'd come back later. As he walked away, he felt like a total idiot. He'd gotten all worked up over this ring when he should have just been at home writing. He sank onto a couch in the waiting area, thinking he must have completely lost his mind. That's when he finally looked up and realized the place was absolutely packed. He tried to get his mind off it, thinking about what he should write next. Suddenly, A system window popped up. His eye of the blind god had activated on its own. He couldn't believe it. The skill was appraising the people around him. He looked at a man in a suit, and a profile appeared. It even had a special note that the guy was suffering from hemorrhoids. He wondered if he was seeing things. It didn't stop. He saw a pregnant woman, and the system confirmed it. Then it showed him another man's private problems. He knew right then he could never tell anyone about this. They'd think he was a madman. He just sat there, trying to make sense of what was happening. A young woman walked past a poster on the wall. It was a call for heroes, for the hunter who would save the world. His eyes followed her, and the system brought up her profile. But this one was different. The special note just said, "She's tingling." That's when it hit him. This was the first time his skill had shown him someone's actual name. He couldn't figure out why. He had no idea what tingling even meant. A voice in his head was screaming at him to just walk away, but he couldn't. He broke into a run, chasing after her. He reached out to stop her. He knew this was a terrible idea. They say curiosity kills the author, after all, but it was too late. He asked her if she was feeling a tingling sensation. The system's message was clear. Her name was Seong Miri, and the note said she was feeling thrilled. So without thinking, Yu Ilshin ran after her. He reached out, shouting for her to stop. A voice in his head screamed that this was a terrible idea. He froze up, realizing he had no idea what to say next. He was pretty sure he was about to get slapped. He finally managed to get her attention. She turned around, looking confused, so he just blurted it out, asking if she was feeling thrilled right now. The moment he said it, he regretted everything. He felt like a total idiot. She just stared at him, looking completely annoyed, but his skill was showing him something else. A strange blue energy was coming off of her. He tried to explain, telling her not to think he was a strange person. But inside, he was freaking out, convinced he'd completely messed up. He kept insisting he wasn't some kind of weirdo. He was pretty sure the police were going to show up any second. Just then, his phone started ringing. He quickly used it as an excuse. He felt a wave of relief. He looked down at the screen and saw who was calling. His demon sister. He put on a big show, acting completely shocked by the call. He quickly told her he had to take it, and then he just turned and ran. After that whole mess, he needed to get his mind on something else. He was on the phone with his sister, happily making plans to meet his niece. His sister was teasing him, calling him a loafer for getting so excited about money. He tried to defend himself, but she wasn't having it. He finally gave up, telling her he'd see her soon and to not be late. He let out a sigh of relief. He was just glad he hadn't gotten himself into more trouble by going for that re-examination. That's when a small voice called out to him. It was his niece. He was completely taken with how cute she was, but then she asked him what dark history meant. Ilshin froze. He remembered with dawning horror that he'd used that exact phrase in the chapter he'd just published. His niece had been reading his work. His niece asked him what update meant, but Ilshin was too busy thinking about how he couldn't resist pinching her cute cheeks. So he did. He couldn't help himself, telling her how cute she was. She got really mad and told him to stop. He apologized right away, but it was too late. She was already pouting, and he knew when she got like this, she could stay quiet for an hour. Suddenly, a system window appeared. His eye of the blind god had activated on its own. The system began assessing his niece as she sat there pouting. The assessment finished, and the result was interesting. The note at the bottom said she wanted a chocolate ice cream cone. He had an idea. He leaned down and asked if she wanted to go get a chocolate ice cream cone. Her eyes went wide, and she started drooling. It worked. A moment later, they were at an ice cream truck, and the employee greeted them with a smile. His niece excitedly asked for a chocolate ice cream cone. Ilshin agreed and walked up to the counter, ready to pay. He started counting out his coins. He was about to order 2 ice creams, but then he remembered he was broke. He changed his order to just 1. The employee looked at the pile of coins on the counter. She told him to wait, but her friendly smile was gone. As she started making the cone, Ilshin couldn't believe his eyes. She was barely putting any ice cream on it at all. He wondered if she was doing this on purpose just because he paid with coins. That's when he remembered he had a way to fix this. He pointed his finger, getting ready to use one of his godlike skills. This was about more than just ice cream. He was fighting for his rights as a customer. Suddenly, the machine went crazy. Ice cream shot out everywhere, overflowing the cone and making a huge mess. The employee screamed, and Ilshin just offered a simple apology. His niece was about to dig into the massive ice cream cone. He playfully asked if he could have just 1 bite. She shot him down immediately. Ilshin leaned back and relaxed, telling her to enjoy it. For a moment, everything was perfectly peaceful, but that peace was shattered by a sudden warning on his phone. He had no idea what was going on. The system told him a skill called Cruel Slaughter had just been activated. Because of it, his battle luck as the unknown god had shot way up. He just stared at the screen, completely stunned. Then, a message came through from a stranger. The man declared that he would devour all of Ilshin's trials and become a true demon god himself. Just then, his niece's ice cream splattered all over the ground. The warnings just kept coming. Suddenly, everyone froze. A man and Ilshin's niece stared up at the sky, and their faces filled with confusion and fear. Another warning box flashed in the air. The sky itself seemed to crack apart, and 2 glowing red eyes stared out from the darkness. Then the creature fully appeared. A massive, demonic bull towered over the city, a being of pure nightmare. Panic erupted on the streets. One hunter knew he was done for. Elsewhere, Ilshin grabbed a woman to protect her, yelling at a nearby soldier that he couldn't hold on for long and she needed to run. The giant bull let out a deafening roar that shook the entire area. Ilshin held the woman tight, trying to shield her. He was scared, but he wasn't about to let her get hurt. Just then, a powerful hunter stepped forward to face the beast, lightning crackling around her. A system window appeared, identifying the monster as the Thorn Bull. Its goal was to devour the unknown god and steal its power. Ilshin was trying to get away from the chaos when he saw the message. He stopped dead. The Thorn Bull wasn't just attacking the city, it was hunting for him. Standing there, Ilshin finally put it all together. Unknown God was his nickname in the game. That monster wasn't just attacking the city, it was hunting for him. This wasn't a coincidence. He remembered the panic, the screaming, and then, after the Thorn Bull was taken down, he remembered the message that popped up. The system told him he'd overcome a trial, and his cruel slaughter skill had ranked up. As a reward, he could get a low-class god's authority for free, but it had to be one for a demon god. He stared at his phone, his anger growing. All of this, the monster, the destruction, it was all because of this stupid app. He was so furious, he almost threw it over the railing. But then, the screen lit up with a new message. It was mostly jumbled symbols, but two words were clear: Saintess and God. He stood there on the bridge, completely confused. A saintess? What did that even mean? The message on his phone suddenly became clear. It wasn't just text. It was a prayer. In another world, someone was calling out to the unnamed god. They were in the middle of a losing battle. Her people were getting wiped out, desperately begging for help. A massive, armored monster towered over them. The small creature could only stare in terror, pleading for mercy. At an altar, a lone figure prayed desperately. She was the Holy Maiden, and her tribe was on the brink of being destroyed, but the enemy had already found her. The leader of the Empire's soldiers laughed, mocking her for thinking she could escape. The monster looked ready to strike. The little creature could only tremble in fear, and back in his world, Ilshin was watching the whole thing on his phone. The system popped up with a simple question. Did he want to save the creature that was begging for his help? This was his choice to make. He stared at the screen. This wasn't just a game anymore. A real life was in his hands. He made his choice. In the other world, the Holy Maiden's relief was cut short. A huge, red warrior from the Empire appeared, its weapon ready. The soldier laughed, telling the Holy Maiden that she was going to be a tribute for his emperor. It raised its weapon to strike, but then it stopped, confused. Something was wrong. Suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning crashed down from the sky, hitting the soldier dead on. It let out a final scream as it was completely wiped out. Back on the bridge, Ilshin just stared at the screen. He muttered that the ant was pretty big. A second later, coins started pouring out of his phone. He had saved her. In the game world, the Holy Maiden looked up with huge, grateful eyes. A message appeared on his screen. She wanted to know the name of the god who had rescued her. Ilshin was stunned. His name? He was just some guy playing a game. After a moment, he typed it in. You, Ilshin. The message on his screen was bizarre. It said the Holy Maiden was now worshipping him. Ilshin couldn't believe it. Worship? Him? Another message popped up. The system had given him a new title, Merciful Redeemer. He just stared at the words, totally confused. Then came the reward. Because he got a good god title, his alignment switched to neutral. And as a bonus, he was given 100,000 coins. He was floored. He quickly did the math in his head. In total, he now had over 108,000 coins. A huge, greedy smile spread across his face. He immediately opened the god tier shop. With all this money, the possibilities were endless. He decided on his first purchase. It was a common item called Blessing of the Growing God. And just like that, a glowing bottle appeared right out of his phone. He watched in amazement as the system began to check it. The description finally loaded. The item was body fluid. He was completely disgusted. Still, he cautiously brought it closer for a sniff. He woke up with a pounding headache, not even remembering how he got home. But as he sat up, he realized something was wrong. His bed was covered in ants. He grabbed his phone and saw a notification. It was about a swarm in his game. The screen showed a terrifying army of red ants with glowing eyes. He screamed and fell off the bed, completely freaked out. A system message popped up, saying his battlefield had been upgraded. His entire room was now crawling with ants. He ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. He was trapped inside with them. That's when one of them lunged at him. It bit down hard on his foot. He screamed in pain as the swarm closed in. He stared at the window. It was his only way out. An idea formed in his head. He was only on the 3rd floor. He figured that even if he fell from that height, he probably wouldn't die. It was better than being eaten alive. Without another thought, he threw his whole body against the glass, but it didn't break. He hit the window hard and collapsed onto the floor. He looked up in horror. The door was blocked, and now the window wouldn't open. He was completely trapped, and that's when he saw it. The thing leading the swarm let out a terrifying growl. Seeing his followers below, Ilshin channeled his power. He gave the command for all troops to attack. His army didn't hesitate. They swarmed the giant armored creature, tearing into it. The sheer number of them was incredible. Someone watching realized this attack was actually strong enough to take down General Stooge. Another command rang out, this time for the archers to move forward and take aim. With the final order to fire, a storm of flaming arrows lit up the sky. General Stooge screamed as the arrows rained down, piercing his body. The giant creature began to fall, completely overwhelmed by the tiny army. One of the creatures laughed. He mocked the fallen monster, boasting about the power of their great empire. The leader of the creatures roared, ordering his troops to charge. He told them to bring the monster's head to their emperor. But in the real world, Yu Ilshin suddenly collapsed onto the floor. He was in serious pain. He gasped for air, but couldn't get any. It felt like he was being crushed. He was being treated like nothing more than an insect. The creatures were crawling all over him, and he screamed in agony. The leader of the creatures began to report to His Majesty, thinking the fight was over. But then, something inside Ilshin snapped. He gathered a massive ball of fire in his hands and unleashed it on the entire army. The leader was caught in the middle of the blast, completely engulfed in flames. The creature stared through the flames, completely stunned by the power he was facing. It wasn't just an attack. In its final moments, it realized this was the power of a god. But back in his room, the power was taking a toll on Ilshin. The same flames surrounded him, and the pain was intense. He couldn't move a muscle. He coughed, wondering if this was how it was all going to end. That's when a new message popped up. A high-class, evil god named Soundless Nightmare had sent him a gift. The system explained that accepting the gift would lock in his permanent alignment. It asked him if he wanted to proceed. Lying there, with no other options, he made his choice. The moment he accepted, a dark energy surged through him. His entire appearance changed, and he could feel the new power flowing into his fingertips. His eyes burned with a strange red light. He could feel the dark energy settling into him, changing him completely. Far away, a massive bolt of energy tore through the sky and slammed down into a city. On a dusty training ground, a young woman let out a sigh. She thought the whole situation was pathetic. She wished she could reawaken the power she once had, the same power she'd used to defeat a giant horned beast. If she could just get that strength back, she thought, getting revenge might actually be possible. But then, she noticed something. She stood there for a moment, just looking out at the city. Back in his room, Ilshin was still on his knees, coughing in the middle of the flames. He cursed out loud, frustrated that nothing was happening. A system window popped up, explaining that the nightmare's power was breaking into his own authority. But the explanation didn't help the pain at all. The agony was too much. He collapsed onto the floor, barely able to breathe. He wondered if this was how he was going to die. The dark energy was overwhelming. It felt like his body was being ripped apart from the inside. But then, one of his own skills kicked in. The system announced that his blind god's eyes were active and analyzing a target. He looked up and saw a girl in a school uniform running right at him. She was shouting, but he had no idea who she was. His ability gave him some information. She was a 19-year-old human, but the system added a special note. Shocking. Suddenly, a memory flashed before his eyes. It had to be hers. A little boy was asking a man covered in bandages if he was really his uncle. To prove it, the man gave the secret password, and the boy laughed, relieved. The boy hugged him tightly, but a woman with a dark aura appeared, telling him to stop. A second later, there was the sharp sound of a slap. The memory ended. He realized he was seeing through the girl's eyes as she stared at a hospital. And inside that hospital, the bandaged man lay in his bed. He stared at the ceiling, thinking to himself that he was sure of it. The girl remembered the day she defeated the huge monster known as the Thorned Bull. She also remembered carrying him to the hospital. Being around that man let her use power beyond her limits. She'd been watching him for days, but still couldn't figure out why he had that effect on her. Then it hit her. She was acting way too much like a stalker. She figured she should get back before her sister found out she'd snuck out, but a sudden noise made her turn around. The bandaged man was clenching his fists, growling in pain. A dark red energy started to flare up around him, and the girl could only stare in shock. Far away, under a massive glowing tree, a voice cried out in protest, begging for something to be stopped. A group of insect-like people begged their leader, the Saintess, to reconsider. They reminded her that the glowing crystal she held was a treasure of their tribe. An elder spoke up, saying that even though someone had saved their tribe, this was too great a price. But the Saintess announced her decision was final. She knew it was a treasure passed down for generations, and she was giving it up anyway. The Saintess explained that even though she couldn't forget the one who betrayed her tribe, she hoped this precious treasure would be seen as an apology. Back in the hospital room, Yu Ilshin was screaming in his sleep. He was having a nightmare about the ants. The girl watching from the window was completely confused by his sudden outburst. He was clearly in a lot of pain, muttering for everyone to just leave him alone. That's when his phone suddenly lit up with a notification. He looked at the screen and saw a message. The Saintess and her followers were praying to him. A new message appeared. The followers wanted to offer him a tribute. He realized they must see him as someone really high up. Curious about what they would give him, he tapped yes without a second thought. The system confirmed the transfer was successful. A moment later, a small glowing orb floated right out of his phone. The system identified the glowing orb. It was the fruit of the world tree, one of only 7 left. Ilshin brought it closer to his face, but it didn't have any smell. He checked his phone for more details about the item. The description mentioned it might be good for his vitality. That was all the convincing he needed. He popped the fruit into his mouth. Almost immediately, his eyes shot open. He could feel something changing inside him. A massive surge of bright blue energy erupted from his body. He grunted, struggling against the intense power. The girl watching from the window looked on, completely stunned. Down below, a dark purple energy began to mix with the blue, and the pain in Ilshin's body grew even worse. The description mentioned it might be good for his stamina. That was all the convincing he needed. He popped the fruit into his mouth. The girl watching from the window looked on, completely confused. Almost immediately, his eyes started watering. It was incredibly salty. He started coughing, shocked by the taste. It was salty, spicy, and even bitter all at once. But then, the horrible taste vanished. He looked down at his hands as a blue glow started to surround him. The bandages around his body started to come undone all by themselves. Ilshin looked down at his own body, completely stunned. He couldn't believe it. His injuries were completely healed. He stood in the middle of the room, the used bandages lying in a pile on the floor. His body was perfectly fine. The girl watching from the building across the street was speechless. She knew he had terrible burns just a little while ago. Ilshin stretched his arm, feeling a surge of energy. He felt amazing. The girl could only stare, wondering who this man could possibly be. Just then, his phone buzzed. A notification from the system popped up. A new function, God's blessing, had been activated. He read the description. He could now use the offerings from his believers to give them blessings in return. This gave him an idea. He stared at his phone, thinking hard about what he could possibly give to a tribe of ants. Miles away, in the other world, the Saintess's followers were getting worried. They had offered their greatest treasure, but their god hadn't responded. That's when one of them looked up and saw something falling from the sky. The followers looked up as white flakes started falling from the sky. At first, they thought it was snow, but when one of them tasted it, they were shocked. The flavor was incredible. Then something amazing happened. A blue light surrounded them, and their injuries began to heal instantly. One follower who was blind could suddenly see again. Another's arm grew back completely. An old follower started to cry. He knew this was a miracle. The Saintess clasped her hands together, tears streaming down her face. She thanked their god, Ilshin, for the miracle he had sent them. Back in his room, Ilshin looked at his phone with a smirk. The system told him he had just gained 101 true believers. His total faith had shot up. He also got a huge pile of god coins. He couldn't help but laugh, thinking about how they were reacting to what was basically just sugar. The system explained how faith was converted into coins. Looking at the tiny creatures on his screen, he thought they were actually kind of cute. Ilshin headed to the hunter marketplace to sell his items. The place was loud and full of rough-looking people, haggling over prices and shouting for customers. In the middle of all the noise, two men squared off. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. One of them leaned in and asked the other if he was looking for a fight. A second later, fists were flying. Ilshin watched from the side and immediately thought this place was way too dangerous. He decided to find somewhere a normal person could sell things without getting caught in a brawl. He turned down a side street, hoping to find a quieter place. That's when he spotted a small shop. Just then, a scream echoed from a nearby alley. He hesitated for a moment, a little unnerved. He figured it was probably fine, though. He pushed the door open and called out to see if anyone was there. Suddenly, a very cheerful woman popped up, welcoming him to the Haija shop. He awkwardly explained that he was there to sell some items. Her eyes lit up, immediately assuming he must be a hunter. He had to correct her, admitting that while he had awakened, he didn't have his hunter license yet. She paused for a second, then asked him to wait while she grabbed a form for him to fill out. She pointed him toward a table and told him to take his time. He thanked her and took a seat. But as soon as he looked at the form, he realized he had a problem. It asked where the items came from, and he couldn't exactly write that he got them from killing ants in a phone game. He gritted his teeth in frustration. He wouldn't even be in this situation if it weren't for the expensive house repair fees he had to pay. Just as he was trying to figure out what to write, the bell on the shop door jingled. A group of huge, intimidating men walked in. The one in front greeted the shopkeeper, Dahi. Ilshin watched them from his table, a little surprised by how big they were. But then, his special ability kicked in. System windows popped up, assessing the men. Despite their huge size, the system's remark was simple: weak muscles. Ilshin couldn't believe it. How could they have weak muscles? The lead hunter told Daye he'd heard her shop wasn't doing well, so he brought some good stuff to sell. Daye was thrilled. As the hunter opened his briefcase, another system window appeared for Ilshin. This one noted that the man used lowly flames. He tried to ignore the constant pop-ups and focus on his form, but then another notification flashed. Assessment complete. His eyes shot open. The hunter pulled a gleaming set of armor from his case. He proudly announced that it was a full set of mithril armor, and it had been tough to get. But Ilshin's system told a different story. It wasn't mithril at all. It was just 29-year-old scrap iron with a couple of cheap skills cast on it. He looked up from his form. This guy was a total fake. Dahi was completely fooled, amazed by the armor's mana readings. The hunter just laughed, boasting that his items were always top quality. But Ilshin knew the truth. The hunter held up 3 fingers. He wanted 300 million won, all in cash. Dahi didn't even question it. She said she'd go get the money from her safe right away. The hunter just grinned, thinking he'd won. But he couldn't just let it happen. Ilshin shot up from his seat, yelling for her to wait. He pointed right at the armor and warned her not to buy it. He told her plainly that it was a fake. The second the words were out, he had a flash of panic, wondering why he decided to step in. The hunters all turned to look at him, and they were not happy. One of the big guys grabbed Ilshin by the shirt and yanked him forward. He angrily demanded to know what Ilshin was talking about. The leader of the group just calmly asked if he could prove it. The leader calmly asked Ilshin to prove what he'd said. His 2 friends glared, ready for a fight. Ilshin knew he had no choice. He raised his finger, preparing to use a skill. He pointed right at the armor and activated God's crushing forefinger. A system window appeared over the armor, revealing the truth. It was just 29-year-old scrap iron, basically trash. Daehee couldn't believe it. The big guy who was holding Ilshin lost it. He roared in anger and drew back his fist, but the leader suddenly shouted for him to stop. He held back his friend, a look of pure panic on his face. Then, the leader bowed deeply to Ilshin. He apologized over and over, calling him a high-ranking hunter and asking to leave. Ilshin was stunned, but just agreed. The three hunters practically ran out of the shop. Ilshin watched them go, completely confused. He had no idea why they thought he was some big shot. With the troublemakers gone, the shopkeeper, Daehee, thanked him for his help. She thought he must be a hermit, which left Ilshin totally confused. Turns out, hermits are people with incredible power who choose to live quiet lives instead of working as hunters. Ilshin had no idea how to correct her. Thankfully, Daehee changed the subject, remembering he was there to sell something. He quickly agreed and placed a ring on the counter. Daehee inspected the ring he offered. She let out a sigh of disappointment. She explained that it was a D-class item with only 12 mana. It wasn't worth much at all. Ilshin was shocked. Even the fake armor from before had over 500 mana. He felt a little embarrassed and apologized. But just then, a blue window popped up in his vision. The system had completed its own assessment of the ring. It wasn't just any ring. It was the Druid's ring, containing the life force of the forest. The system even gave him a tip. He should give it to someone named Seong Miri, who was nearby. Ilshin recognized that name. Ilshin froze. He knew that name. Seong Miri wasn't just anyone. She was the Lightning Empress, a top-tier hunter, and she was standing right in front of him, crackling with blue energy. This was the person the system wanted him to give the ring to. Hey, real quick, my mom said this channel would get 0 subscribers. If you enjoyed this story so far, click subscribe to watch the next part.